recorded today?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting for the town of Simsbury. I'm going to call to order this meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 14th, 2019. If you'd all please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to take the roll call. Please say here or present, whatever you desire. Holly Bem.
Present.
David Blooming.
Here.
Aaron Levitt-Smith.
Here.
Craig McCormack.
Present.
Alan Needham.
Here.
William Rice, present. Elizabeth Burt.
Present.
Richard Cortez.
Here.
Gary Lungarini, absent. Okay, so we have the full complement of regular commissioners, so there's no need to appoint an alternate to a full position tonight. Okay, next on our agenda, we have approval of the minutes from April 23rd, 2019. Mr. Needham, if you would lead us through that.
Okay, thank you. Looking at page 1 of the proposed minutes, April 23rd, does anybody have any additions or corrections? Nothing? All right, moving on to page 2. I wasn't certain, starting at line 69, if that really captures what we talked about. Mike, it says that you stated that the 65-foot height is allowed in public zoning districts?
Industrial zoning
Yeah.
districts.
I didn't think that was right. Thank you. So can we change public to industrial? Anything else on page 2?
Nope.
Page 3?
Line 120, you're missing the word "be." Subdivision will be coming.
Mhm.
Anything else, page 3?
All right, I make a motion to accept the minutes of April 23rd meeting as noted.
Second.
Yeah, as amended. Aaron, did you second?
Yes.
You can call him.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I abstained just because I wasn't here.
Okay.
Me too.
Very good. Okay, back to our agenda. Next, so today we will be opening a public hearing, and just let me read into the record the text here. In accordance with HHD CV 17-6077573-S, Palmer, Royce et al. Versus Town of Simsbury Planning Commission, order dated 12/7/2018. So that was the appeals court decision for the original application. Application number 1602 of Mansour Prime Properties LLC agent, Royce Palmer, owner, for a 19-lot affordable housing subdivision under CGS 8-30G on the property located at 80 Climax Road, Assessor's Map D20, Block 608, Lot 001, Zone R40. So, before I open the public hearing, I'm going to ask Mr. Glidden to kind of give a synopsis of how we got where we are. And then I'll ask that the applicant address the issues that were remanded back to this commission. We'll also give town staff the opportunity to answer questions from the commission. When we're through with that, we'll open the public hearing, at which point members of the public will be able to say what you'd like to say. Okay, so the public hearing's not open quite yet, and Attorney DiCrescenzo.
For the record, it's important to note that the public hearing is limited to the issues that are here on the remand. It's not the entirety of the application, it's the 3 issues that were called out by the court for further evidentiary proceedings. So the public hearing is limited to those issues that the court wanted to hear more testimony on.
Okay. And also, just for the record, I think we have 3 commissioners that were not on the commission at the time this application was heard, but I'd like them, 2, I think, 2 or 3?
2.
3? 3. Mr. Blumey, Mr. McCormick.
Oh, you're talking about
Mr.
alternates.
isn't
I'm sorry.
seated,
Yep.
He's not seated, but he could participate in the public hearing.
Correct.
Okay? So I'd like to ask each of you to confirm that you have reviewed the record, such that you're comfortable with the content and context of the application.
I will confirm that I have spent not as many hours as the commission did, but many hours reviewing the details, printed out all the minutes of all of the meetings that were concerned of that, have that here. Also got from Mr. Glidden a document that had all of the submittals and everything. So I've been through all of that. So
Thank you, Mr. Blumey.
my mind swims with all that knowledge.
Mr. McCormick?
I can't confirm that my mind is swimming with all that knowledge, but I can confirm that I've reviewed the record in advance of this hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Cortez?
I've reviewed all the applicable material.
Thank you. Okay, so now, Mr. Glidden, if you could summarize the situation and just let everyone know how we got here.
So, on November 15th, 2018, there was a memorandum of decision that was issued based on, the commission may recall, you had an application that on March 28th, 2017, was for a 19-lot subdivision pursuant to Connecticut General State Statutes 830G for an affordable housing development of the property known as 80 Climax Road. The commission denied that application based on 10 reasons. The reasons varied from drainage to traffic. The court reviewed the record, and as I said, on November 15th, 2018, they issued a memorandum of decision. Essentially, this memorandum of decision sustained 7 out of the 10 reasons why the commission denied this application and remanded this application back to the commission on 3 issues.
Let me just clarify one thing. Sustain the appeal of 7 of the 10.
Okay.
In other words, overturning the commission's decision on those 7 of 10 issues.
Bob's keeping me honest.
But, you know,
Yep.
it's good.
So
It's important to put that in the record.
I'll just say a few of the reasons, such as one of the reasons that were remanded back was reason number 7. The applicant failed to submit valid soil testing in the area of proposed basins. Standard practice for infiltration system design includes testing at appropriate elevations in relation to the proposed detention, retention pond, as well as testing in the vicinity of each pond to avoid localized anomalies. This was something that the judge basically said, we're coming back for the hearing tonight, so the applicant could supplement the record and possibly address some of these issues. The other, once again, is related to the infiltration detention, was reason number 8. Infiltration data provided by the intervener and infiltration rates developed by the applicant are not sufficient to accurately model the length of time required for each pond to drain dry. Ponds that retain water for extended periods can be a safety hazard in regards to drowning and potential insects breeding. This is another comment going with providing more engineering data on the design and performance of these systems. The last reason, reason 9, although the applicant added a dry well to pond 2, hydraulically separated from the outlet structure versus performance of the dry well depends on the surrounding and underlying soils which have not been investigated to the proposed depth as indicated by test results to date. Therefore, the functionality of the proposed structure has not been proven. So all of these relate to the basin, their design, their performance. The judge remanded it back to the commission with specific instructions with requiring that, one, that the applicant supplement the data for the soil testing, then 2, would submit the revised drawings to the town engineer for his review. And you have some correspondence between Andrew Quirk and Jeff Shea in your packet. Bob, you want to?
Yeah, I just sort of add to what Mike is saying on pages 81 and 82 of the decision. Yes, it's an 82-page decision. The court said the following, which is really the instructions for the commission to follow. Accordingly, the appeal is sustained except as to those three issues identified above, which Mike just read, reason number 8, 7, 8, and 9. The matter is remanded back to the commission for the plaintiffs to have the opportunity to respond to these issues and for further hearing and consideration by the commission. After a reasonable time for the plaintiffs to respond to the reasons articulated by the commission and to the underlying comments made by the town engineer Shea, that were the apparent basis for those reasons, the commission will hold a hearing and make evidentiary findings on these issues. The commission retains discretion on these issues and whether to grant or deny the plaintiff's application. The remand is limited to these specific issues, however. And then it says the court officer was directed to schedule a status conference between the court and council, which they did, and the status conference led to the order, which is dated 12/7/2018, and there are 4 paragraphs to the order. Paragraphs 1 and 2 talk about the plaintiff submitting to the town engineer comments, which has been done. The town engineer responding to those comments, which has been done. And then tonight, we are at paragraph 3, the commission shall hold a public hearing on the remanded issues within 60 days thereafter of the town engineer's comments. And then paragraph number 4, which is within 15 days after the hearing, the commission shall make evidentiary findings on these issues and make its decision on the remanded issues, along with the reasons and evidence supporting such determination as required by General Statute Section 8-30G. And then file its decision and supplemental return of record with this court within 15 days thereafter. So you don't have to make a decision tonight. You do have to make a decision within 15 days of when this hearing closes, presumably tonight. And then that information, the amended record, has to be transmitted to the court 15 days thereafter. So that's kind of the game plan that controls your proceeding tonight.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I would ask the applicant to present evidence addressing or commenting to the 3 remaining points.
Lou Wise from Road and Nassau and Hartford. I'm the lawyer that's representing the applicants in this matter for several years now. Yeah, so I just wanted to supplement a little bit what Mike and Bob have said about where we are and why and how we got here. And I want to emphasize the fact this is not obviously a typical public hearing. This public hearing was ordered by the court. It's part of the appeal proceeding, and the issues are very, very limited in scope, and for both you and for the public, anybody who wants to comment on it. And as Mike and Bob said, the issues are limited to the three reasons that Bob read to you, or Mike read to you. Let's go back in time. The commission denied the application. You gave 10 specific articulated reasons for denying the application. And all but reasons 7, 8, and 9 survived. The other 7 issues were either abandoned by the town during the appeal proceeding or rejected by the judge. As you heard, the judge remanded on those 7 reasons, and the way he summarized those reasons were: the first reason, reason 7, was a failure to submit valid soil testing in the area of the proposed drainage basins. Reason 8, summarized, was inadequate data to model accurately the length of time required for each drainage pond to dry. And reason 9 was the functionality of the dry well, which was added to the plan, was not proven due to inadequate investigation, again, of the soil surrounding the well. So the remand was ordered by the judge for the sole purpose of giving us the opportunity to respond to those concerns. And as the judge pointed out, your reasons 7, 8, and 9 were all based upon the town engineer's reports that you received. Those were his concerns, which you adopted in reasons 7, 8, and 9. Since the remand, Mr. Quirk really, has responded fully to each of those concerns raised in reasons 7, 8, and 9. He's here, and he's going to tell you more of the specifics of what he did. But just quickly, we did additional soil testing. We did some additional calculations. There were some tweaks made to the drainage system, and these were all done in coordination, really, with your town engineer. There were meetings between the two, and finally, and you've got, I believe they're all on the record, the memos back and forth between Mr. Quirk and Mr. Shea should all be in your record. And after Mr. Quirk submitted a second analysis and response, Mr. Shea concluded in his most recent memo dated April 30th, 2019, Mr. Shea concludes by saying, he says, in conclusion, the plaintiffs have provided the information requested to appropriately review the comments. He's referring to reasons 7, 8, and 9. To review the comments and concerns stated in reasons 7, 8, and 9 of the Planning Commission denial of the application. Any previous concerns relative to reasons 7, 8, and 9 have been satisfied, in my opinion, with the revision to the plans and supporting documents. So we have now responded to all of the concerns. We've provided all the additional information that Mr. Shea requested. We've done all the additional soil investigation that he questioned, and he is now satisfied that reasons 7, 8, and 9 no longer have any basis. He's not concerned about those issues anymore. Under the remand order, you now have to decide whether to continue to rely on reasons 7, 8, and 9 for the denial of the application. And I would respectfully submit that given Mr. Shea's rather clear, unambiguous conclusion that he is no longer concerned about these matters, that you no longer really have any grounds to continue to rely on those reasons, because you based your reasons on his concerns. Those concerns have been satisfied, There's nothing else that, there's nothing left for you to basically rely on in the record to continue to support those reasons. And so therefore, we think that based upon the judge's order, our response, and the town engineer's expressed satisfaction that all concerns have been met, that you really have no alternative now but to abandon those reasons, which of course will result in the approval, basically, of the application. And Andrew's here, and he's going to get, I don't, unless you have questions about the details of the drainage details, the drainage system details, Mr. Quirk is going to give a quick overview and not get too much into the weeds on this, but if you have any questions, he is here to answer your questions, as is Mr. Shea. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
Good evening, Andrew Quirk, professional engineer and principal with Kratzer Jones and Associates. I'll go through those reasons, and I won't go into very big detail, but give you enough information in addition to the submissions that you have there to hopefully make a decision. As discussed by Attorney Lou Wise, the court remanded this case to the Simsbury Planning Commission for the limited purpose of allowing the applicants to provide additional information with respect, as you've heard several times now, reasons 7, 8, and 9 given by the commission for denying this application. The applicant has made every effort to fully satisfy any concerns regarding these 3 reasons, including hiring additional professional staff on the design team, aside from myself, and meeting with town staff until they were fully satisfied. I will now review the 3 denial reasons and steps that were taken to address. Reason number 7. The applicant failed to submit valid soil testing in the area of their proposed basin. Standard practice for infiltration system designs include testing at appropriate elevations in relation to the proposed detention-retention pond, as well as testing in the vicinity of each pond to avoid localized anomalies. Reason 7 is in reference to Mr. Shea's application comments in his March 10, 2017 memo, whereby I'll just quickly read the applicant's response to comments regarding the validity of soil testing is not sufficient to satisfy our concerns relative to infiltration. As previously noted, standard practice for infiltration system design includes testing at appropriate elevations in relation to the proposed detention-retention pond, as well as testing in the vicinity of each pond to avoid localized anomalies. Also, the guidance suggests that measured infiltration rates should be adjusted to allow for a factor of safety. The following are guidelines from the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual regarding infiltration practices. A, infiltration rates should be reduced by a safety factor to account for clogging over time. The recommended design infiltration rate is equal to 1/2 the field measured infiltration rate. B, test pits or soil borings should be excavated or dug to a depth of 4 feet below the proposed bottom of the facility. C, infiltration test soil borings or test pits should be located at the proposed infiltration facility to identify localized soil conditions. For infiltration basins, 1 field test and 1 test pit or soil boring should be performed per 5,000 square feet of each basin area. A minimum of 3 field tests and test pits or soil borings should be performed at each basin. The design of the basin should be based on the slowest rate obtained from the field test performed at the site. So in response, on January 7, 2019, additional soil testing was performed at the subject site to meet the soil testing guidelines from the 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual. For each basin, 3 test pits are recommended to meet the manual's recommendations for the basins based on their size. For stormwater basin number 4, 4 tests were performed in addition to the previous 2 tests. For stormwater basin 2, similarly, 4 new tests were performed in addition to the previous 3 tests. In each case, the minimum number of tests required was exceeded, even if the previous results were excluded. The additional tests were performed by glacier drilling with a geoprobe system machine that extracted 2-inch diameter soil cores in 5-foot increments. Soils were explored to a depth of a minimum of 4 feet below the proposed basin bottom and the proposed dry wells. In addition, the applicant hired David Lord, a registered soil scientist from Soil Resource Consultants, to observe the soil tests and provide a soils report of his findings in addition to my professional soil observations. Permeability tests of the soils was then provided by independent material testing lab. Soil samples were provided at varying depths so as to explore the soil permeability within the basins, at the basin bottom and below the basin. All the soil data was included in the February 25th, 2019 memo. So just in summary, we had myself, a soil scientist, an independent testing lab. We wanted to make sure that we thoroughly explored with more tests, even just on these current ones, excluding the previous tests to satisfy the requirement. The applicant has now provided soil test data in excess of the guidelines for soil testing as described in Reason 7. Denial reason number 7 has now been fully addressed by the sufficient number, depth, and type of testing, as well as input from multiple professionals. The town engineer has reviewed, and any previous concerns relative to reason number 7 have been satisfied. Reason 8, infiltration data provided by the intervener and infiltration rates developed by the applicant are not sufficient to accurately model the length of time required for each pond to drain dry. Ponds that retain water for extended periods can be a safety hazard in regards to drowning potential and insect breeding. The proposed stormwater basins are designed as both detention, meaning a controlled discharge, and retention, infiltration through the surrounding soils. The portion of the basins above the controlled discharge function as detention, in which stormwater is received and released at a controlled rate. The lower retention is about 1 inch on stormwater basin number 1 and 5 inches for stormwater basin 2 on the current plans. The 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual recommends that infiltration basins drain within 72 hours after the storm event. The manual also recommends that basins do not hold water for longer than 5 days to reduce the potential for mosquito breeding. Stormwater basin number 1 is estimated to drain in 67 hours, and stormwater basin number 2 is estimated to drain in 70 hours. These final calculations are based upon even the most conservative soil test data as recommended by the town engineer and applying a 50% clogging factor. It does not account for the fact that we're also introducing an 18-inch bioretention soil on the bottom, which will further promote infiltration and maintain water quality. The applicant has now fully addressed denial reason number 8 by sufficiently modeling the length of time for the basins to drain and demonstrating that it meets the recommendations of the 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual. The town engineer has reviewed this, and previous concerns relative to reason number 8 have been satisfied.
Can I ask you, you meant what is going to be at the bottom of the basin? What kind of soil?
It's called a bioretention soil mixture,
Thank you.
and it's to promote water quality and infiltration. Reason number 9, although the applicant added a dry well to pond 2 hydraulically separate from the outlet structure versus performance of the dry well depends on the surrounding and underlying soils, which have not been investigated to the proposed depth as indicated by test results to date. Therefore, the functionality of the proposed structure has not been proven. As described in our response to reason number 7, additional soil testing has now been performed to investigate the soils in the area of the proposed dry well. The functionality of the dry well has now been shown to infiltrate the stormwater and not pose any viable threat to public health or safety. The applicant has now fully addressed denial reason number 9 by sufficiently investigating the soils surrounding and underlying the dry well, as well as demonstrating the functionality of the dry well. And again, the town engineer has reviewed this, and any previous concerns relative to reason 9 have been satisfied. So in conclusion, previously, the town engineer withheld his approval of the proposed drainage system because in his professional opinion, there was not sufficient data submitted to evaluate the system. The commission relied on those concerns as its reasons 7, 8, and 9 for denial of the application. The applicant and design team have worked thoroughly and very closely with the town engineer to provide more than the required data with input from multiple professionals and made revisions to fully demonstrate the functionality of the system. The town engineer has reviewed, met with the design team, and provided a final review indicating that any previous concerns relative to reasons 7, 8, and 9 have been satisfied. concludes the presentation. When I can try to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any comments, questions?
I just have one little
Sure.
question. I was just looking through your time to drain calculations, and you have, at the end of each calculation, you have two notations, one in parentheses applicant and the other in parentheses town. Could you explain what those two, what that means?
We went through the soil test data and came up with what we thought was the most reasonable synopsis of the soils in those areas to come up with a calculated time. That's the applicant time. We met several times with the town engineer, and rightfully, he is choosing the most conservative number in each case. And the town number is based upon the most conservative and the town's recommendation rate for those. I think what's important to understand is if we came to a consensus on the number to use, and using the most conservative numbers and the 50% clogging factor, it still meets the manual. So the range that's shown was just between the original numbers that we had and what we went through in terms of the most conservative and appropriate design for the basins.
Okay, there are some very large variations in these numbers. I
There
mean,
But
but you're saying that even the conservative numbers do meet the,
yes, they meet this, they meet the recommendations of the manual using the most conservative numbers.
I'm surprised. Is the science not exact that the numbers would be so far off?
The soils vary. So that's based on the soils, not the science per se in terms of.
And how do you know what the distribution mapping of those soils are throughout the entire basin area? I mean, so based on, did you say 4 soil samples, recent new ones?
4 new tests, in addition
There's
to the
still
old tests.
this difference in calculation reflects possibly large variations in soil density distribution?
Correct, primarily due to depth. So there is a correlation between the depth of the test and the resulting permeability rate. But I guess, again, just underlying that we met several times, we went through, and we were using the most conservative numbers, and we're meeting the guidelines with the most conservative numbers
So the
for
numbers
each of the basins.
The numbers you quoted just a little while ago for basin number 1, draining in 67 hours, that corresponds to what is referred to as the town.
Correct.
The town number. And likewise for basin number 2, the 70 corresponds to the town
That's correct.
calculation.
Correct.
Both still in compliance with the guidelines.
That's correct. That's correct.
I have a question, and I believe this is for Mr. Shea. It said, "These plan revisions do not immeasurably change the analysis for peak storm runoff leaving the site for all design storms, but improves the safety of the stormwater basins." So I don't know how to interpret that, because at one point he's saying it doesn't measurably change, but it improves the overall safety. So is improving the overall safety good enough, or are we still, so I just wanted some clarification on that.
I don't want to speak for Mr. Shea, but I can give my opinion on that.
Okay.
And so there were some modifications to the stormwater basins that improved the safety. So those
Yep.
numbers that I last gave you in terms of the depth. On stormwater basin number 1, the depth of the retained water is 1 inch. There were previous concerns about a depth of pool that would be unsafe, or an extended period of time that would create mosquito breeding. So that's the safety issue has been addressed without making a change to the measurable amount of rates that are discharged from the site. So that's the performance of the stormwater system in its discharge rates from the site. So there were on-site changes that were made to improve the safety, that did not have a measurable impact to the performance of the stormwater discharge. from the
Okay,
site.
thank you for clarifying.
And then in the second basin, I believe we were at 5 inches there. Again, draining within the safety time period and well less than the 5 days, that would be the mosquito breeding guidelines that's in the manual.
So then it doesn't contradict. Thank you for that. Okay.
If I follow this, you are connecting the two basins. They're interconnected.
Correct, that's always been,
That's always been the design.
correct.
So when calculating the design for one, some of the outflow is going to the other basin.
All of the outflow, aside from what infiltrates in the soil, goes from one basin to the second. They're in series.
And your calculations consider this movement from one to the other.
Yes.
Okay, because it's, that portion is, you know, I understand the testing of each one.
Sure.
But whether interconnected, you've got water going from one to the other. Okay.
Town staff have any comments they'd like to share with the commission? Okay.
Jerome Shea, town engineer. Just to follow up on Andrew's description, I think he did a good job explaining the changes that were made. As you recall, our primary concerns were the permeability of the soils. The soils were highly variable on the site, and that's why we insisted on actual field testing and laboratory testing of those soils. I think the testing really showed that there was variability in the soils, and it was important to know how those soils would perform relative to infiltration. Another important thing that Andrew had noted, the original design was more of what we would call a wet detention basin, and the modified design is more of a dry basin. So the issues or the concerns with safety, with potential drowning, kind of go away. And obviously, the mosquito breeding issue also is remediated through that design. So the permeability of the soil is not as much of a factor. Really only more from a perspective of maintenance, where you don't have a wet bottom to be able to maintain, cut grass, adjoining the bottom or the bottom itself. So that design changed the model slightly, which Andrew explained, adjusted the control structure to some degree. Overall, it did not change the model drastically. As you can see, the results are very similar to the original stormwater model. So again, focusing more on the permeability of the soil. The testing really helped us determine what the appropriate infiltration rate was. And, allowed us to have more confidence that that stormwater basin would be available for the next storm if there was repetitive storms that occurred, which happens quite often these days. And as Andrew explained, the original testing was very limited in that it was taken at the surface of the site. And because the site's being fairly consistent or fairly drastically modified in the area of the stormwater basins, the new testing actually gave us results at the appropriate elevation where we would really understand and expect the permeability to be there so that we could rely on it. We also, through our conversations, made some constructive changes to the phasing plan. Because of the loss of the depth, the so-called, I guess, depth that's not usable for actual retention, through the delay in putting in the bioretention mixture, we'll have some capacity to control runoff. And sedimentation that might occur off the site during the construction phase. So I think that was a very positive outcome of our conversations. It should help us during construction. But in general, again, our focus was permeability, both from the dry wells and from the bottom of the ponds. And we feel that that's been satisfied. So those three concerns that we had through the original application have been satisfied.
Just one question. There had been some discussion, which I think is alleviated now, about a concern about stormwater ending up on the roadway. So that's no longer a concern with the changes?
Not sure that's something we can comment on tonight.
I think it's within the, I think it's within the issues that are raised by 7, 8, and 9.
So in terms of that comment, I had made a comment relative to that some time ago. My position hasn't changed on that. With storms larger than a 100-year storm, there would be an overtopping through the emergency spillway onto the road. This is a very unusual situation where you have an emergency overflow discharging to a public road. So my position has not changed on that. I still have concerns with that. And it's in the record. Just say that. We don't fully understand what that impact would be and how often that could occur. But we know that 100-year storms occur much more often these days than have in the past. And we don't expect the applicant to design for that storm, but the discharge point is normally not a public road, and, that is the case here.
And my question, I thought, was related to 7, 8, and 9. I thought it had to do with infiltration and water
No,
retention,
that's
so
actually
that's
a
why I
separate
asked
issue.
it.
I would like to come back to the calculations one more time. There are many roads to Rome in engineering, and I've seen different sets of calculations turn up parallel answers that are a little different from each other. You have no concern that there's so much variability in these results? I know one's worst case and one's best case, but 1 hour as a result versus 67 hours is a large difference. That's not a concern?
That's not my calculation, that's the applicant's calculation. I think he explained, based on our recommended permeability rates, that it's the larger number. And that's the number we care about.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments, commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Shea. Okay, so at this point, going to open the public hearing, and any members of the public who would like to make a statement, I ask that you come to the podium. There's a pad and a pen up there. If you could jot down your name and address so we can have that for the record, would certainly appreciate it. So, public hearing is open. Would anyone like to speak?
Are we limited in what can be talked about? From the
7, 8,
public?
and 9, only.
Correct.
I thought that was made pretty clear. Please.
Hello, my name is Roy Pomerantz. I live at 65 Blue Ridge Drive. Given the ambivalence involved in this hearing and some of the different interpretations of the information, as a taxpayer, I would feel pretty put upon if, after the contractor, having set up a limited partnership, dissolves his limited partnership after completion, and adjacent homeowners decide that they have severe liability issues.
Excuse me, sir, but does this pertain to items 7,
Yes.
8, or 9?
It does. It has to do with the potential flooding of neighboring properties. I would want the board to consider that the contractor be required to set up either an escrow account of sufficient time and money or an irrevocable letter of credit of sufficient time and money to take care of future unforeseen liabilities.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Please.
My name is Paul Nosovich. I live at 78 Climax Road in Simsbury, adjacent to the applicant's property. I have some concerns around the dry well being proposed, or dry retention basin being proposed. Some of those being the biomass that you're putting at the bottom of the well. What is the maintenance period for that? The town, I assume, is going to be eligible for that maintenance. Is there any actual maintenance plan in place for maintaining that biomass? Other thing is, dry detention wells do not prevent and block sediment and pollutants from continually going downstream. So putting 19 houses on that property with all the surface runoff going into that storm drain is going to increase the amount of pollutants, and that dry basin is not actually going to retain those. It's going to continue to pass those down stream into further waters. One of the big things with the area is this property in this application will be on public sewer and water. The neighboring properties in the area are all well and septic, except for the Avon side. All the Simsbury side is all septic tanks. And there's a concern there on our wells that this additional runoff pollutant draining into the surface could affect the well water and safety of our drinking water in the town. There's also, during construction, what about the runoff during construction? How's that going to be handled? Yeah, the basins are great, but that's an end state. 19 houses isn't something that goes up overnight. There's going to be an extended period of time where there's going to be basically bare soil just sitting there with lots of water being retained. I can tell you, I live in the area, I live right next to it. The soil there right now does not really drain water very well at all. No matter what, and I know that's, a little bit in the variability that was done on the soil testing. The other thing is, aside from maintaining the bottom, the pollutants, there's also, if there's a foray into the detention pond, again, maintenance for that to make sure that water is flowing properly into the detention pond and not building up on the properties. Again, I don't feel very comfortable in, yes, it's the conservative worst case scenario from the test holes that were drilled, that it's 67 and 70 hours on a 72-hour time limit. That's not a very good margin of error, and I do understand that, yes, it is the more conservative of the test drilling, but again, given the variability in those test drillings, what's to say that other drillings in the area, if done, weren't going to be worse than the worst case scenario currently drilled and tested. And that being said, there's also the concern of, they said in the event of an over 100-year event, of the spill water onto Climax Road in and of itself. That area of the road pretty much is wet all the time during the winter anyways. I can only imagine that this additional water could make that worse. And that goes down to not only safety of traffic, but safety of people that are walking around that area, and could be detrimental. So there's concerns around the maintenance and longevity of that, and I want to see the responsible plan put in place that here is a maintenance schedule for this dry well that's going to assure the continued operation and performance of that dry well. And I would like to see also I would like to see more conservative numbers on the drainage of that dry well from a time standpoint. The original numbers that were pushed were 14 to 49 hours for one of the wells, one of the ponds, and the other one was put at 2 to 25 hours in the original proposal. That's now doubled and almost tripled. So I'm not sure if I'm very comfortable with those numbers right now. I'd like the commission to take that into consideration in your decision.
I ask him a question, please?
Sure.
Sir, can you tell us, are you a professional engineer?
I will revert to not answering that question.
Okay. Fair
I'm
enough.
under no obligation to answer any questions from you.
I think he has an obligation to answer the question, but I think his non-answer speaks for itself.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Going once, twice, 3 times?
Before you close the public hearing, is the commission satisfied you've heard absolutely everything you need to hear from the town engineer, or from the other? Because once we close, we can't take additional testimony, we can react to the testimony.
Well, can I ask a question based on those last comments? Is there, what is maintenance? Do they have to maintain, and what is, I mean, I think that's a legitimate question. I'd be curious as to what the answer.
I took some notes, I'm going to try to answer some of those questions.
Unless
Many of these items were addressed as part of the previous application, and were part of some of those reasons that were not sent back to the commission for review. I'll touch on them, but they're outside the scope of those 3 particular items that we're here to study. The bioretention soil was on the previous plan. There's the maintenance schedule for the stormwater basins is on the previous plan. And there is a maintenance plan on that. It's addressed as part of that previous plan. That was part of the review and the court's decision. I don't believe that the issue of the spillway is part of 7, 8, and 9, those 3 particular issues. But I will just touch on it, that as part of the submission, we did rerun the computations to demonstrate that there were no measurable changes, as was commented and brought up there. And the 100-year storm, as routed with the latest calculations, would come up to 307.9. The spillway is at 308, so it does not overtop the spillway. And the second basin, similarly, comes up to 305. The spillway is at 305.8. It does not overtop the spillway. So that was similar on the previous computations. So the concerns about overtopping the spillways would be in a situation that's beyond the scope of the rerouting, because these reroutings don't show that that's a condition that would be applied. I know there's some concerns about the variability of the soils, which is why we're here. And we went through quite a bit to come up with a very conservative design. I can say with full confidence that this is a system now that is very conservative, has multiple steps. There's multiple basins to catch each step along the way. There's been so many measures put in place to ensure that this is going to function. You know, with every meeting that we had, your town engineer is very concerned about that and wanted to ensure that we use the most conservative numbers. So the plan before you uses those most conservative numbers. As far as the variability of the soils, we did, 3 tests would be, based on the basin size, only 1 test would be required by the area. They're not large basins at all. There's a minimum of 3 per basin, so that's why there's that standard of 3. But these are basins that are smaller than this room, and we did 4 tests in those areas. So more than 4 feet deep, plus the previous tests. So we have, based on the manual standards, more than fully explored the variation in the soils. And the variation, again, occurs with depth. So we're taking numbers, not for the part where the stormwater is going to come directly in contact with it, but for 4 feet below, to be very, very conservative. So both between ourselves here as engineers, as other professionals that were brought on the design team. This is, I have full confidence in this system. It's a very conservative design with multiple steps to ensure that it's going to function. The construction sequence was part of the previous plans, and, you know, I know the town engineer touched upon some improvements that were made as part of our review, whereby we can improve upon the erosion controls during the construction sequence. But again, it was, those issues of the construction sequence were addressed with the previous plan. We've just made a further improvement upon it. But there were measures in terms of erosion controls, sequencing. There's detailed sequencing about how much of the property can be cleared at any particular time. That was all part of the previous plans and approvals. But I just, with the variability, rather than being concerned about these numbers being not the worst case scenario, we're taking by far the worst case scenario in each of these tests. And it demonstrates that we meet the recommendations and guidelines that for it to perform by the standards that were put forth as the basis for the denial, that we now meet those standards.
Just in summary, I just want to make sure everybody keeps their eye on the ball, which is, did we respond to the specific concerns that were raised by Mr. Shea during the proceedings? And it had to do with the adequacy of the soil testing, and it had to do with the analysis of the soils themselves, and so forth. And your town engineer is satisfied that we have met all of his concerns, and we have done all the additional testing and analysis that he asked us to do. Those are the issues before you. That's what your reasons, you were adopting his concerns when you came up with reasons 7, 8, and 9. He no longer has those concerns. So it seems to me that reasons 7, 8, and 9 can no longer stand, because the other issues that were discussed are no longer viable. They were all discussed in the proceedings before, and your other reasons for rejecting the application, as I said before, were either abandoned by the town in the appeal or rejected by the judge. So those are the only three reasons that were left, and now the basis for those reasons has now been basically taken care of by our response. So I respectfully request that you, I guess it would be, you agree that reasons 7, 8, and 9 no longer support your denial. You have to report back to the judge and let the judge know, hopefully, that you no longer have those concerns. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for reading the record.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to discuss the concept of the public hearing being extended so that we could review all the documentation thoroughly in light of what we heard today, and still have the option of asking any further questions of Mr. Shea for our next meeting. I don't know if there's a need to close it out tonight otherwise.
I think we could.
Yes.
I don't think we can.
Well, you can. I'll read the order. Commission shall hold a public hearing on the remanded issues within 60 days thereafter, and the thereafter is May 13th, 2019 was the last revision of the town engineer's letter. So the original letter was April 30th. So even if you take April 30th as the date when the clock starts running on your 60 days, you have time, if you want to carry over this public hearing. It doesn't change the scope of the public hearing, but it does give you the opportunity to contemplate what you've heard tonight
And if you have additional questions that you would like to get into the record of the public hearing, you have the opportunity to do that. If you close the public hearing, your 15-day clock begins to run. But in my view of the court's order, you have 60 days from April 30th. Let's use we're talking about conservative estimates here, so let's use a conservative number. April 30th was when the original letter was published. My reading of the order is you have 60 days from that date to conduct your public hearing, whether it's one night, 2 nights, or however nights you feel you need to get all the evidence into the record that you feel you need to carry out the judge's order.
Holly, what do you expect would be entered into the record if we kept the public hearing open?
The answers to any questions that we might have after more reviewing, and reviewing in depth what we've been presented and what we've heard tonight. Just a chance for deliberation and asking any further questions that we might think of that we're not thinking of right here at the moment.
I mean, one of the reasons we're here is because the applicant told the court that they didn't have an opportunity to reply to Mr. Shea's latest comment. And the court said, well, they didn't get an opportunity to reply. So go back to the public hearing. I don't want that to happen again. If you feel that there are issues that you heard tonight that you want further elaboration on, I don't want those to come in after the close of the public hearing. I want those to come in during the public hearing, so it's crystal clear in the record that if you ask a question of Mr. Shea, the applicant has a chance to respond, and vice versa, all within the public hearing.
So you were proposing to leave the public hearing open?
Yes, I think
Okay,
it's prudent.
that's okay.
I think it's
Well,
prudent.
no, I heard you say, because that's what I was, we wouldn't be able to answer questions if we closed the hearing, so.
That's correct.
okay.
And it need not lead to additional delay, because you could continue the public hearing to another night, tell us to prepare whatever you want prepared for your decision, close the public hearing that night and make a decision within a reasonable period of time, of days or weeks. So we're not talking stretching this thing. I don't think anybody's interested in stretching this out much longer. We've been with this for a long time. But I really do urge you to get everything into this public record that you feel you need to make a final decision on this application.
Your next meeting is May 28th.
Yep.
2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks.
Do other people feel like it needs to be kept open? What's the?
I don't see the harm in it, keeping it open, personally.
Yeah.
I guess with the interpretation that the 60-day clock started on April 30th, it certainly gives us a little breathing room.
Right.
Disagree with that, Lou? I mean, I mean, 60 days takes us to the end of June.
June 30th.
The date of today's letter. I think we're okay with the timing end of the order. I really do.
Well, the problem was that there was more than one memorandum that went back and forth. The order.
I'm looking at the latest one.
Yeah, so it says within 30 days thereafter, after we were to make our comments and then we were going to.
Well, I'm using April 30th as the date when Mr. Shea published his letter. He revised it May 13th, but let's use April 30th.
Yeah, the April 13th, the May 13th was just.
Yeah, so let's use April 30th. That brings us to the end of June for the 60 days. I don't think you'll take to the end of June, but if you need to, you could. That's my position.
I mean, I don't, in principle, I don't have any objection. It's a fairly simple, straightforward issue right now, and we're talking about 3 memorandums. So it's about
And I'll just read again what the court said on page 81 and 82. After reasonable time for the plaintiffs to respond to the reasons articulated by the commission and to underlying comments made by town engineer Shea, the commission retains discretion on these issues and on whether to grant or deny the plaintiff's applications. Retains discretion on these issues. So you need to be satisfied that you've heard everything you need to hear on these three issues to exercise your discretion.
Again, the reason I say it's a fairly simple matter is because the three reasons that you gave were all based upon Mr. Shea's reports to you that he was not satisfied with certain things. He's now satisfied. So that's why I don't think this is a very complicated issue. If he's satisfied with the concerns that you relied on in coming up with reasons 7, 8, and 9, then with all due respect, I don't think you have much discretion on what to do with those issues at this point.
Well, with all due respect, we took in a lot of testimony, and while his reasons were cogent and formed the basis of our response, I think that I myself have this many pages of notes to just go back and review to make sure we understood exactly what we were thinking.
But be careful,
when
we
wrote that.
can't receive any new, anything unrelated to items 7, 8, and 9.
Right, but everything that is existing on the public record is still existing on the public record.
On 7, 8, and 9.
Regarding 7, 8, and 9.
That's all.
Yes, that's what I,
Well, yes, but you specifically, in coming up with 7, 8, and 9, said that you were relying on Mr. Shea's reports.
Well, relying on
Not on
some.
somebody else's reports.
No,
or-
I think, just to clarify, I understand why you think it's a simple issue. We take this seriously. It's a big project. We just want to be sure we get it right.
I said
in
I'm
my
not
opinion.
opposed. I'm not opposed to
So I
continuing.
think it's a little simplification to say that we based it just on Mr. Shea's comment. I think we all had concerns about some of the things that then we looked to the town engineer, but we came to similar conclusions, and without there being that evidence to support what our concerns were, and we turned to the town engineer, and there wasn't any support for that. I think that's what formulated the basis, and, we had other issues that obviously the court didn't agree with, so I think in regards to what Commissioner Bem is saying is that, this has been how many years, and we took great pains to make sure we were very thorough and came up with very cogent remarks for the court. And I think we just want to be sure, if what I'm hearing you saying is, we just want to be sure that in making this decision, we're again in line with making those cogent remarks. I know it must be frustrating because you're like, oh my gosh, I just want an answer right now. No, I get that, but we just want to be sure that.
I don't have an objection to
No.
your continuing. I just,
It's-
I don't see it.
To the extent that you can provide questions after tonight's testimony earlier than the start of the next hearing, will give us the opportunity to pass it on to the applicant and allow them to comment on it, as well as if there are questions to Mr. Shea, allow them to comment as well, and questions to the applicant, let Mr. Shea comment on it.
And if you're going to have questions, I'd ask that you individually send them to me, and I will farm it to the appropriate party, not the whole commission on one
Okay,
issue.
so commissioners, can we agree that any questions or clarifications that we need to be made be submitted to Mr. Glidden within, individually, but it has to be in time for whomever needs to reply can do so prior to the May 28th meeting. So, I would say no later than next Monday, so May 20th.
But that does not preclude you from asking questions.
It does not, right? Yeah.
thank you.
It's just we're trying to get everybody to have the same opportunity to respond on level playing field.
Well, I'm thinking if a commissioner is unable to present a question or a point of clarification within a week from now, that 2 weeks is not gonna make a big difference. But, yeah, I understand the rules, but my direction to the commissioners is submit any of your questions or points of clarification individually to Mr. Glidden by next Monday, which will give the opportunity of either the town staff or the applicant to reply or go back and forth even, with the expectation that this will be kind of ironed out by the May 28th meeting.
I have a question, sort of, whose standards are we meeting here? Is this a Society of Engineers? Is this the state of Connecticut? Is this the town? It's probably written down someplace, but I'm not clear where the standards come from.
In your actual decision, you referenced Mr. Shea's memo, which referenced the 2004 Connecticut
That's right.
stormwater law.
Okay, so this is a 2004 Connecticut stormwater.
Relative to permeability, yes. Stormwater design is actually town standard.
That's correct. But specific to the infiltration practices and soil testing guideline, when we talked about the number of tests, depths of tests, that standard is from the state manual.
Not the 2004. Are you aware of any update to those standards at this time? Underway?
No.
I'm just coming to the conservative side comes close to some of those particular standards. And if the standards change,
Well, it's not retroactive.
I understand that. But I'm just trying to understand where we are, whose standards, and sometimes you say, wait a minute, standards.
Just to add, on the technical side, we keep referencing it's close to the standard. The 72-hour is for infiltration practices, and as we've both commented, that these basins are no longer, with the revisions, they're functioning as dry detention basins. The issue for public health and safety, which would be the benchmark for any 30G, was the 5-day mosquito breeding. We're well under that. We met both standards to come up with, again, a conservative and proper design. But this would have to rise to the level of, as brought up in 7, 8, and 9, a public health and safety issue of drowning or mosquito breeding, and we're well under the 5 days. We met the infiltration practices. I don't believe these basins are categorized properly as infiltration basins. There's a portion that is, and there's a portion, the majority of the basin, vast majority, is a detention basin.
Okay.
But we met conservatively both standards, but we're well under the 5-day mosquito breeding. I just want to make sure, I don't know if that came through in the memos and the statements, that it's public health and safety on these issues, and this is a very conservative design purposely.
And if I may just add one thing, the reason that we are even discussing this, the reason that there was a remand to allow us to respond was because of a memo that was submitted by Mr. Shea after the close of the public hearing. And so we never got, and in that memo to you, Mr. Shea raised the issue of the 2004 whatever it's called, water quality guidelines, and we never had a chance to respond to that memo because the public hearing had closed. And so that's the reason, the primary reason why the judge, when he got to these 3 reasons, said, hey, the applicant never had an opportunity to respond to those concerns. That's why we're here on those today.
Thank you.
Okay, so sensing the consensus of the commission, I'm going to leave the public hearing open with my instructions to the commissioners to send any points of clarification or questions to Mr. Glidden. Don't copy anyone else on that, just send it directly to him by Monday, May 20th, close of business.
But this does not preclude us coming up with some more questions upon further diligence
Correct.
before the meeting.
My business day on that day is 7 PM. So it's some extra hours for you.
Okay. Moving on. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I get a motion to continue the hearing?
Yeah, okay. I move that we continue the public hearing for application 16-02 until the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting on May 28th.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on to new business. Okay, so there's no receipt of new applications. Now, Mike, just a point of order, this referral that has to do with the McLean application, it's under new business, but we took it up.
That's an old business, that's
Yeah.
continued from last month.
All right, so let me just move to amend the agenda to take that, what's shown as number 2 under new business referrals, and put it under old business. Have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so now, under old business, a referral, CGS 8-3A, referral to the zoning commission for zoning commission application number 19-22 of TJ Donahue Jr. Esquire, agent, McLean Affiliates Incorporated petitioner, for a text amendment to Article 10, Section K, Table 10, bulk area and site requirements of the Simsbury zoning regulations regarding maximum height. So this was continued from our 4/23 meeting. The public hearing for the zoning commission public hearing is scheduled for June 3rd. Zoning commission, yeah. Okay, Attorney Donahue, please, when we last left off, we were expecting to see some results of balloon test.
Chairman Rice and members of the commission, I have some pictures for you. We did do the balloon test, and we'd like to share with you copies of the test.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty easy to interpret, and you have it,
Yep.
We do.
We do have it.
Yeah, we have.
so we're all set.
Would you like your extra copy back?
Yeah, we actually, I have that.
I do.
Oh, it's in the packet. Oh,
We thought we might see you, Commissioner Burton.
I was gonna ask Commissioner Burt if she attended.
I alerted the town staff, the McLean staff, to find her and bring her out. It was a beautiful day, as you can see. It was attended by Robin Newton and your new member of your staff. To look at and interpret the study, the X's on the building on the left side of the diagram are the locations where the balloons were flown from. They were put on a solid basis, they were put on, they were black helium balloons, and they were flown on twine measured by the engineers at Mylone and McBroom. So the X's tell you that balloon number 4 was raised to 61 feet from the existing grade, balloon number 3 was 61 feet from the existing grade, and balloon number 1 was 62 feet from the existing grade, and then balloon 2A, we put one at they put one at 185 feet, one at 92 feet, and one at 70 feet.
Yep.
And you can see from the various views where the balloons are. You can see in the left bottom picture, 2A, that shows the height of the 185-foot balloon. And basically, the tests, and we took more pictures if you would like to see more pictures, but the tests proved that it might be possible to see a portion of the building from the last house on Washburn Drive, but not likely. And the house on Washburn Drive does have a view of the last unit of the Burkholder building because of tree cutting there. But it's a very large site, it's heavily treed, and it's going to be very difficult for anybody not on the premises to see any structure at the level of which we talked about.
But
And
in D, so in picture D, though, you see the balloon.
That's the 185 balloon.
Oh, that is okay.
Yeah.
Oh, 2A, okay, gotcha. All right. And then E,
Make it easier to see the photos. They put the photos up on the big screen if the commission wants to look at it.
okay, but
behind-
2A is the
TJ, sorry, TJ.
185.
Yeah.
So 2B, that's behind trees, 2B and 2C.
Right.
All right, 2A, no, 2A, oh, they're both 2As, okay. So that would be above what they're proposing. But E, oh, no, not E. Okay, wait. Okay. I think
So
62, that, okay, so what's that bill,
Which one?
B?
Yeah, which
In
building?
picture B,
Okay.
can you go? What is that building? What are those buildings?
It'd be on the right-hand side,
Yes,
that's the back side of,
McLean.
that's the back side of the main building.
oh, so that's just what you would see if you were on the property in McLean, okay.
Well,
And
there was one question as to whether it was possible from Meeting House and Teacher's Turn it could be seen,
Right,
and that is half the distance to Teacher's Turn. So it's very likely you can't see it.
because that would be behind trees.
Yes.
Well,
Except-
further back.
Aaron, the balloon is a balloon.
I know.
It's this big,
Right,
okay? So balloon pictures are useful in trying to give you some notion as to the height of something.
right,
But I don't think it's a great way to measure how visible something is. For example, it's like taking a picture of a tall, skinny tree and saying this is how big the tree is. But if you put forest all around it at the same height, it's a lot easier to see the forest than just it was that one tree.
yeah, but this is the only thing we have to go on, Alan.
I know.
I mean, this is why they did the
We need to
test,
understand
but-
what it really is.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to
balloon-
find out what exactly we're looking at and what's the height. So that's what I'm trying to do.
That's the height.
The balloons,
So-
I think, were in the scope of 4 times the size that you said they were.
Yeah, but
Pictures-
it's just a point.
It's a
Right,
point.
it's a point.
Yeah.
But it's the only thing we have to go by to try to figure this out and try to figure out sightlines. So that's why I'm asking these questions. So B is, that's from McLean. The B, that building is a McLean building.
Yes.
So
Okay.
here's where B
Yes.
is looking.
C and D are from.
Right, but I want to
Hot
look
Meadow?
at I'm looking at the pictures, you guys. Let me ask my questions. Okay? I listen to everybody else's. So, an A, I'm sorry, can you tell me where A is? That's on the property too?
If you,
Okay, so that's from that building. So again, it's looking, so none of these pictures, it looks like C and D are from the golf course?
yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
10th hole.
All right. So it's hard to, but that's 185 feet. These are a little, so in the winter, you'd be able to see these
Yes, definitely.
because you can see the balloon.
What's the
Okay.
current?
You wouldn't be able to see them from anywhere off the premises, but you would, from the golf course, you certainly would.
Yeah, so,
And you
the-
should know that we have talked with the leadership of the golf course, and they're very supportive of the program.
but you mentioned teacher's turn. So picture B was, you said half the distance to teacher's turn?
Yes. And looking here,
Yes,
Teacher's Turn is there.
okay. So we don't really know what they would see from teacher's turn. Really?
Mike, what's the underlying maximum height for this zone?
It's a R40 zoning district, it's an
35.
underlying zoning district, and the maximum building height in the R40 zoning district is 35 feet. That's to the midpoint between the peaks and the eaves. So your peak actually could be 40, 45 feet.
Right, but that same standard of measuring the height applies to the.
It will apply to this-
the 65 feet.
to the 65
Could be
feet.
75.
Exactly.
So it could be higher, yeah.
The peak could be higher, but what would be considered the building height will be that middle point between the peak and
Correct.
the eaves of the proposed structure.
So then that 85 could be slightly, that's from the golf course. One.
Knew you were going to be able to see from the golf course. That's-
Yeah, they said, right, they said that last week.
That was,
So this is 62,
The whole thing?
so that could be higher.
65.
Okay, but that's on the property.
So.
I'm still not convinced about teacher's term, though.
So, okay, and what would be the concern relative to the POCD with what you're thinking about?
I can't answer that. I'd have to go through the POCD. I'm just trying to get my bearings, because if I remember last time, people on this commission were worried about what you could see. So I'm just asking questions around what, because if I remember correctly, people had concerns about the impact this would have on sightlines, so to speak, what people would be able to see. I mean, I think the golf course was one thing, but I think that's why we waited to see about the balloon test. So maybe the people that had concerns about that, I'd have to go back and check. I'm just trying to gather information about how much this is going to be seen from other parts in town.
Can I ask a question in general about this? I was not here at the meeting last week, but I read the minutes, and I just wanted to ask about the conversation that ensued when Commissioner Needham asked whether the text amendment would create an issue in the future with others who would start, I mean, are we opening up Pandora's box?
Right.
How does that work, Michael?
So.
Once this happen, does it set a precedence, and then in 50 years, all
You
of
have
the...
that map,
I
Mike?
do, you know
He
what? Alan, I also-
identified on the zoning map other R40 zones that are big enough to put
The
this on.
healthcare facilities are under Article 10 of the zoning regulations. Basically, it's a specially permitted use of any zoning district. This exception to the building height rules, so let me backtrack. The current regulations read that if you're going to propose a healthcare facility, one, the location where you want to propose this under this section of the regulation must be served by public water, public sewer. So your public and water and public sewer are really limited to the Route 10 area and a few spurs that go off of it. Secondly, there's minimum acreage requirement. Existing regs requires
5 acres.
5 acres.
I read that, yeah.
Our proposed amendment is a minimum of 40 acres. But it also says that, so you'll have a 40-acre parcel, but the proposed building will have to be located at a distance greater than 500 feet than a residentially used structure outside of this facility. So then where can it land in town? It's the possibilities of this landing other places with those two safeguards really narrow down between McLean's, the current campus up here, Powder Forest, Seabury, the Seabury parcel right on the bend. That was where, after the 2011 storm, the town had all the storm debris was dumped there and processed by the FEMA contractors, just off Powder Forest Drive. I mean, the parcel out front, possibly, but that would be dependent on the other parcel associated with the Powder Forest development here, right where my finger is. But that really will depend on distances from Nutmeg Court and from Candlewood.
Mike, question, may I, on that side?
Yeah.
the Powder Forest wouldn't have any restriction on height because it's an industrial zone, the underlying zone.
Actually, you're right. Underlying zone is I2,
So they can go
I2 over
5
there.
foot.
They can go to 65 feet based on the underlying zoning district. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Thank you. I forgot that was, because I'm looking at the pad. So, I mean, really, based on that size,
Wasn't there something along Route 10 that it could go on?
well, here's the Route 10 issue, would be somewhere down in Garden, the CLMP area here, but once again, the underlying zone there is I2. So therefore,
You could do it anyway.
You can,
We can
you
go to
have the height
65.
exception there, and that's served by public water, public sewer. I mean, with the acreage requirement, the distance separation of residentially used structures, and the fact that you need public utilities, it really limits the ability for this thing to land at a larger parcel. I mean, the larger parcels for this to land, we're talking, 40-acre parcel would be, let's just say Riverwalk did not abut currently what's under construction over at the Hartford campus. With the old cornfield, that was a 40-acre parcel. That's a great example. Just give you size. A parcel like that is what you'd be looking for with sewer and water, which there's few and far between for this to land. If Westminster were to ever close, I mean, that would be somewhere it could land in a redevelopment parcel.
And I must say, I also found the comment by Chairman Rice also pertinent, because I look at that every single day as I drive down my.
Westminster's new
Yeah,
building.
Yeah.
When you move, 20 years ago, I never thought I'd be looking at all these buildings every single day.
Mike, this is landing on, or would land on an R40. So you're saying there's no R40 site that you could put one of these on?
To be served by public sewer and water, that's the problem.
But it'd have to be an R40 of 40 acres.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm
I
asking.
mean, if we had public sewer and water up at Simsbury Farms, maybe Simsbury Farms, but once again, the utility restriction comes into play then, because it's still septic and well up there.
Now, we just changed some I2 to
B.
B1, right?
Yeah.
We just, zoning things do change.
This is a zone.
But
The
it's,
sewer
but
lines
it, but,
change.
but also remember, so this is an overlay, it goes into any zoning district, so I mean, it's not just the R40 zoning district or the industrials or the business. This is one of the regs that it can land anywhere. Just with the restrictions that it's served by public
The underlying
utilities.
zone.
Well, then, the standards of the underlying zone for building height under the current regs would apply. This change would give an exception to the
So
rule.
if one of
Only for
these,
purposes of congregate housing facility, CCRC, or assisted living. I mean, it has to be that use to fall within the small zone changes that we seek you to make.
but if zoning was changed from R40 to industrial, which would allow 65 feet, which regulations prevail? The R40 that it changed from, or the I2 that it changed to?
The current designation, the I2. So then, yeah, the 65-foot, the special exception that's in Article 10 for the I2 zoning district would apply.
Is the McLean property in Powder Forest? And is that, where does that fall in this discussion?
No, McLean property's not in Powder Forest. Well, I'm just,
Not McLean, excuse me, I'm sorry, Seabury.
I refer to the Seabury property because they owned the property. It
Yep.
was part of a master plan for the Powder Forest development, and it was supposed to be a 200,000 square foot, similar sized building is what's being proposed, 110 or 120 bed assisted living facility.
That's the most likely next candidate unless something else happens in town. And all I'm asking is where,
What's the height, what would be the height
Well,
restriction?
they just
That
had a
can go-
with that master plan, it was just a footprint, it was a number of beds associated
They
with
didn't
that.
put height.
There was no building plans at that point.
But what-
But, once again, the underlying zone in that pad is industrial, so
Okay.
technically, they have the exception to go up to 65 feet
Already.
already,
Yeah.
with no restrictions on the placement of the building, unlike this reg, where the placement of that building has to be a distance greater than 500 feet from an abutting residentially used structure.
Mr. Chairman, just to review how the zone application developed. As with most things, particularly with McLean, we went into town staff, we reviewed it, we told them the building program, what we needed, and that we were trying to get 50 to 60 residential units with an additional floor, and the general location of it and how it's going to tie into the rest of the buildings in the campus. The Burkholder building it will be attached to, and then we'll have easy, open access the other way. We put the application together. That's the best practice, and I always feel it's better to work with town staff. We looked at the alternatives. The alternatives would be to seek a variance, which is, McLean would be a pretty sympathetic candidate for a variance. Or we could convert the zone to a PAD, which is, it's kind of a campus-type thing, and that may be appropriate. We would have a lot of moving parts, and it's not as desirable as we'd like to be in the town with the significant remnant of additional land that McLean has. That wasn't preferred by them, and I agreed with them. So then we decided to go to the text amendment and just tweak this little piece which restricts, which states the zone, the height shall be what the existing zone is. And the language that we crafted and ran by staff was something like, it will default to the height allowed in the existing zone. However, in the circumstances that we have, with more than 40 acres and with more separation than 500 feet from any other residential structure, it can go up to 60. And that's how we got here. It wasn't helter-skelter. It was a deliberate process where we thought about it a lot and worked on it a lot. I learned something all the time, but the one thing that I learned in the process with a lot of hours with the planning staff and with the town staff is, for the elderly, linear feet is the enemy, and elevators and the ability to condense people and make them closer to each other and walk and have to go less far is a very key element of the design of this type of structure, and that's why we're looking for that.
If you did a PAD, what would your mix of use be? Residential and what?
Actually, PAD would not apply to this
what I thought.
property because it's zoned residential.
Right.
You couldn't land a PAD in the
Because it's
residential
not
zoning
commercial
districts.
underneath.
It has to be commercial or industrial.
Or a form, or
that-
similar to a PAD, a zone in and of itself, but it could be that.
So I'm not clear why this wasn't handled with a variance. I mean, rather than take the zoning regulations and add all these extra languages except for or unless, I mean, how many times can we do that before the zoning regulations are extra paragraphs of unless the nearest tree is so-and-so far away and
That's
it's
not what
on
we
a
did here,
corner,
Commissioner.
but-
That's not a
But
fair
you're taking
characterization.
an R40 zone and adding a 65-foot high structure by adding some language to a zoning
Yeah, but
regulation that wouldn't allow this otherwise. So
respectfully, we're not doing that to a residential neighborhood. We're doing that to an existing significant commercial establishment, which is a congregate care facility and an existing.
that's true, but you're putting it in an R40 zone, which is.
No, it's already in the R40 zone. As a matter of fact, when Senator McLean gave that land, there was no zoning in Simsbury. He gave that land for a home before there was any zoning in Simsbury.
But you're asking for a text amendment to change what's allowed in the zone where this building's going to be put, and that zone is an R40.
The words that you say are true in their sequence, but they're out of context. That's not what
That's a good line.
we have one of the best institutions in the community, the largest employer in the community. If it didn't exist, you'd have to invent it. And we are telling you that we've had staff, experts tell us that this is the best possible development to make sure that this institution stays healthy and can have a census which supports itself and proceed. That's what we're telling you. We're not
I think we understand that, but
Yeah, I
we're
get
not
that.
going to do it at the expense of other residents. And that's what we're trying to ensure is not happening, is that it's detracting from the value of someone else's property. It's
Or the town in
It's
general.
changing the character of the town, or the sense of place. These are the terms that are in the POCD. Okay? And
So Mike-
I understand. The POCD promotes diversity in housing, okay? But by the same token, it also promotes affordable housing. And when I brought this up the first time in our meeting, I don't think you really responded to my question. Are there any provisions for affordable units in this application?
In the greater community, a very significant portion of the patients are assisted patients. In these specific apartments, there is not provision in these apartments for affordable units. The bungalow units serve as affordable market units and will continue to do so.
So the percentage of the affordable will be going down by adding however many units here.
50.
I thought they were taking out.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but it's not funny, I don't
No,
think.
I'm not laughing.
He's laughing.
Yeah, I am left. I see the answer is pretty obvious. If you build 50 units and none of them are affordable, the percentage changes
It's
slightly.
shocking to me that this commission would be testing the mission of McLean. I don't know if you know it. If you don't know it, you should go see it. You should see what it does for the community. And I agree, I'm an advocate for affordable housing. I agree with that. But we're starting to twist things around. But you are questioning the mission of McLean here, and that's unbelievable to me.
No, I don't think anybody's doing that.
I didn't
But this
hear that.
POCD is not a book about McLean. It's a book about McLean in part, but it's a book about 20-something thousand people and where they live and what the town looks like and how it functions. So supporting McLean is
I'm very
fantastic.
disappointed that your staff isn't here who went on the balloon test. It was conclusively viewed by us running around a golf course everywhere. This cannot be seen from anywhere off the golf course.
So I want to ask Mike a question. So there's no R40 zone this could apply to in town?
I'm not aware of a parcel that's served by
That's important to me.
Yeah.
public
because-
sewer.
yeah.
No.
I mean, even without the restrictive add-on language in the text.
Well, I mean,
No,
just-
it's already in the
Well,
regs.
let's start off, I mean, you have to, never mind, like I said, yeah, what you said, the separation distance, look at the requirement of public sewer and public water. You have to find a parcel that's zoned
And that's
residential.
all part of the regs right now.
That's existing. So they already had that, the zoning commission has that safeguard in there, so it doesn't, it doesn't land someplace where it's not compatible with the existing land use. The other thing that TJ didn't mention was, in the existing regs, there's a lot of safeguards where they're similar to standards associated with the special exception, with dealing with compatibility with the neighborhood, the surrounding where the proposal will land. So, I mean, there's existing safeguards within those regs to prevent,
Current regs.
which are still remaining in the regulations. Those are not changing. And just one other comment that the commission had earlier, and there was discussion of, why did the applicant choose the route of a text amendment versus a variance? The issue with going the variance route under current case law is it puts the burden of demonstrating of a legal hardship is very high on the applicant. And we both, collectively as a group, we tried brainstorming, so what exactly could we say is a legal hardship with this one? And none of us with a straight face could say, we got like the silver bullet for this. So it was, why don't you try the text amendment first, rather than go that route? Because not waste your time with trying to make an argument that very likely you may not be able to legally make with the zoning board of appeals.
That was my
Okay, so
question, thank you.
Let me, again, I apologize, I'm only reading from the record, because you mentioned here on the platform already, I think more than once, that this is needed for the financial continuity of McLean. You seem to imply that McLean would go under if they didn't build this big thing.
Go under is a very strong statement. This was part of their plan to continue to grow. In this industry, in this business, their plan, their strategic plan says, if you're not growing, you're dying. there's a significant need to support their assisted living and their senior housing of additional amenities, which do not exist there now. So, and I would, if we had time, I would bring in the experts. I'm not, but I've sat at the sessions, and this is a strategic plan for them to grow and thrive, which is what they're asking you to do. And they are a business too, so your plan of development talks a lot about economic development. But they would, the constraint of not being able to move forward with this type of program would be a significant blow to them.
And can I say?
But the significant blow does not constitute a legal hardship?
No, it
No,
wouldn't.
it doesn't.
No.
No, economic
Nothing
hardship.
personal or financial under the law is considered a hardship
Oh, I'm sorry.
for zoning board of appeals. They have a very narrow, that is the one board that they have, and Craig can speak to it, his years on ZBA, not to call you out, Craig, but they have a very narrow charge under statute and case law on what they can do versus, this commission, obviously, you have charges when it regards to updating the POCD, looking at changes, the zoning text and how they're compatible with the POCD, and subdivisions. The zoning commission, they have the regs, they have the district maps, they deal with the day-to-day applications of uses of land. So it's just the division of labor amongst those boards.
So a three-story building wouldn't be viable? Just ask.
It's not part of their plan.
So we're addressing a business plan.
We're addressing a text amendment.
Not a business
Right.
plan, please.
Required by a business plan.
Well, but it's a text amendment, and it's not out of line with other developments like this that house seniors. I can name a few that have various they have villas, they have cottages, they have,
But are they
it's the
four-story?
yes, they have 4 stories.
Simsbury.
It doesn't matter, it's consistent, I'm just saying, their business plan is consistent with keeping their, and if you look at the POCD, there is talk about financial and the fiscal and the increase in, all of this, if you look at 8.21, ensuring scale, ensuring seniors, whatever, but it is in line with other organizations that do similar stuff.
Thank you. It cannot be seen from other residences. Period. It cannot be seen
From Teacher's Turn, that was,
from anywhere.
Yeah.
Not from Country Club.
well, the Country Club, yes.
Possibly if you go to one part of the yard of the one guy on Washburn,
Oh,
you can see.
Country Club Road, right, the
There's
Country Club.
There's
Oh,
one,
excuse me, sorry.
there's only one parcel that this may be visible, and it's one of the parcels on the end of the cul-de-sac of Washburn. Otherwise, based on the balloon test, you couldn't see the balloons anywhere outside of the golf course. Nowhere. You couldn't see it on Great Neck. I
Great
keep saying
Pond.
Great Neck. Great Pond. You couldn't see it on Teacher's Turn. You couldn't see it on like 90% of Washburn. It was one parcel at the end of the cul-de-sac that already sees the facility, may see a portion of
Right.
this structure, and not see the structure in its entirety. It may just have a glimpse
Yeah.
in like winter leaf,
Yep.
a winter condition.
So what you're saying, even though we don't have the pictures, that you did go to Teacher's Turn and
Robin and Janelle Mullen, who's the new zoning enforcement officer, actually met with TJ, went out, and so it's not just TJ's pictures here. They actually were out as part of the balloon test, because we were invited. Unfortunately, I had a conflict, so they went in my absence, and both of them can attest to, and will probably, at least one of them will be at the zoning commission meeting, along with the applicant and further pictures.
Mr. Chairman, we need a motion to move this to acceptance.
Well, we need a motion, unless you want to keep deliberating, which I'm hoping that we can be decisive.
So I move that, let me see if I can do this. So I move that we give a positive referral, right? So this is a referral to the zoning commission on 1921 zoning commission application. Do I need to be more specific?
Maybe you could, something you saw in the POCD, maybe, at least say consistent with the goals
Well,
and
it is
objectives.
consistent, and I wrote some notes to myself. It's consistent with 8.2. Find it.
Jeremy, your budget passed.
Great.
It's consistent with 8.21 and 8.2A.1 and 8.2A.4. So ensuring that new development is compatible with surrounding areas, that it encourages property owners, developers to work with officials in preparation of their plans. 9.1B.1 and 9.1B.2, it's consistent with that as well, and 10.2.1. I can read those if you'd like. Nine point one B, maintain positive relationship with local businesses.
So this is economic development.
Yep.
And what was the, section 10?
10.2.
10.2A.
2.1. Oh, I don't.
Diversity 2, right?
Maintain the integrity of existing residential, no, what was it, 10.2?
10.2.
Oh, 2, I'm sorry, yeah, A.1, seek to provide for housing choices for seniors who wish to live in Simsbury, including those of limited means, but it is providing, and maybe not for limited means, but housing choices.
So I'd like to suggest that we also add a comment that the POCD also encourages housing for seniors of limited means, and that the zoning commission should consider conditions that improve the options, or improves access to affordable housing relative to this application. Okay? So that's your motion?
Yeah, but I don't say, I don't feel, personally, I don't think that's a reason not
Wait,
to.
hold on, we have a motion on the table.
Okay.
Is there I second the motion. Any discussion?
Yeah, I don't think because it's not affordable, I think they have other affordable housing on. I don't think that's the flavor of what they're asking for personally, but.
I agree, it's not what they're asking for.
Also remember, so you're giving an advisory opinion to the zoning commission, so they can, this,
They can
Consider,
agree to
so
do
they
with it.
can, yeah.
you're putting a suggestion out there, seeing if
Yep.
they hear it.
Under discussion, I might be the lone dissenter, but I feel that this is in conflict with 7.1, 7.1B1, maintain and improve the design, to ensure developments reflect, complement, and enhance the overall character of Simsbury. This will be the second time this calendar year that we are asked to approve a project that will affect other properties, that will cause a sightline issue with other properties. In the first case, this was up off a development off a mountain road, and it met all the criterion, and yet I felt very bad that the people who built their houses will now be looking at something that they were under the impression that when they built their houses would not happen. It was a zoning change we made.
Where was that, Holly? I'm sorry.
That was that industrial parcel that.
Oh, by Hoffman?
Yeah.
Up that, okay.
And there's some houses that are affected by that. Now we have one residence that's affected by this, and an entire golf course whose current owners have no problem with it, but as we all know with golf courses nowadays, tomorrow that could be a bunch of homes. And I'm feeling bad about what we're doing to our homeowners. I myself, I don't approve of
Like,
this.
what's your quizzical look?
I would caution you on that comment on the golf course, because I believe that there's deed restrictions that would prevent the redevelopment of Hop Meadow Country Club as residential. Is that true, TJ? Just a point of clarification.
There's common ownership. The applicant is the owner of Hop Meadow.
Yeah, McLean owns it, owns the land at Hot Meadow.
And someday they could sell it for subdivisions. I mean,
Yeah, but I don't think
golf-
we can do a text amendment based on something that might or might not in the future. I don't know. I mean, that's,
When I think of planning, I think about what we're doing to the future of the town.
right,
I've
but,
seen a lot of things happen in the last decade that, to me, don't look like they were as well thought out as we could have done.
right, but
And
My
I'm trying to
concern-
think about that as we go forward.
right, I think, but you're speculating something that may not happen. Like, I think your view of the surround, like, houses that are there, like, you know.
Well, there's only
and
one
the-
according to.
Right.
But,
And looking at the, you know,
I see a lot of things that were done with the feeling that nothing around them would change, and things changed. And
Right.
I'm not just talking about the last 10 years, but that's part of urban development. That's all, suburban into urban
I think the
development.
advantage, Holly, I don't think the golf course would be subdivided myself because of McLean's desire to, have open space and whatnot. But the advantage there is that if this project goes forward, it would be there, and whoever's developing the land
would know.
would see it.
Yeah.
It's a known.
Not like it would happen
Right.
after.
Right, it wouldn't happen after, and I feel that they would be buying into it, knowing that. But again,
Yeah,
Changing
I
the-
have some concerns too.
Yeah, but I just wanted to voice that I do feel that, I never thought on Route 10, in the middle of Canton, we'd turn a golf course into a shopping mall, but there we
Well,
go.
we didn't do that.
No, I'm not saying we, but,
would've.
and not that I
They
actually,
didn't know that they were gonna get it either.
and I don't actually have any heartburn with that one. It's not my town. But, and hey, we all liked the close shopping, and it was well done. I'm just concerned that, these are my feelings. I just wanted to
Yep.
have that in the discussion.
Alan?
So I'm calmed a little bit by the knowledge that no other R40 could pull this off. That makes me feel better.
So far, until
But I would-
sewer
just a moment.
lines are
But
extended.
I am concerned with, there's all kinds of references in the POCD on, and I can give you page numbers if you want, on protect the character of town.
Yeah.
Scenery, possibly hillside, sense of place in particular. I don't like introducing a building in excess of 65 feet high into Simsbury, period. I just don't like it. Because what do you say to the next guy that wants to build a 65-foot high building regardless of where it is?
Meet the regulations.
Yeah, that's,
Meeting them
Do
here.
it in an I-2.
We're doing a go around here.
Or we do
You
another
can do the
text
same.
amendment.
You can do another text.
text amendment.
I don't like all these text amendments, which is not TJ's problem, or McLean's. That's what I'm uncomfortable with, is putting such a large building. I have not met, and maybe you guys have, anybody that's happy with the giant buildings along Route 10.
no.
Only the people that will be.
And they
moving in.
blame us for it, too,
And the
by the
people that
way.
move in are moving in for a while,
Yeah.
okay? They aren't owners. It concerns me of how it's a death by 1,000 cuts around here.
How tall are
And
those?
they're 3 stories.
Oh, those are 3?
And they're huge at 3
Yeah.
stories, and this is huger, if that's a word. Now, it's tucked away in the woods, we can comfort ourselves with that, but it's one more. And that the next guy when you build a certain kind of
Okay,
building,
Now, Alan, we're not making the decision.
Right.
We're making an advisory referral to the zoning
I
commission.
understand. So
Okay.
I'm telling you, you asked for comments.
Yep.
These are my comments. So I worry about introducing an even larger building into town and what the long-term effects would be. Because when you see
Yeah.
one of those, it's that much easier to propose another. So that's my concern. I have mixed feelings about this, frankly.
You did too, Bill. What was your concerns?
Well, the fact from going from a 35-foot regulation height to a 65, that's a big change.
Yeah.
Big building.
However, I believe that this is going to be tucked away and buffered in such a fashion that it's not going to adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood.
Well, it will be today. We don't know what it'll be like tomorrow. And again, we don't know where the sewer lines are going to end up and where the water lines are going to end up. I've lived this in a town where it was so tiny and bucolic in a farm town, and now it's 100,000 people. Bang, in a matter of 3 decades.
I don't worry about houses built in the future. I worry about where we live today and the next building that comes along. Is it like, oh yeah, we approve those?
Any other comments?
Bill, I think you stated it well. It's tall, but that's how I'm looking at it, is it's tucked away. I think if it could be seen more, then I would have concerns, but yeah. And I'm not sure, Michael, help me out here, but what are the likelihood that another 65-foot building could go in somewhere else in town without much consternation? Or
There
Who
are
said that?
I-2 spots.
In the industrial zones.
But that can be done now.
That can be done right now.
Right, so it doesn't, right,
So-
right.
But it
So,
hasn't
It's
been
not
done
something
yet.
that can't be done in town already.
right, so,
It's just one
Under
text
existing
amendment
regs.
away, though, remember.
No,
no,
those
that
are,
existing
can
regs.
be done now. That's
No,
what
I'm
he's saying.
talking about in the R40 zones, it's just one text amendment
No, there's
away.
more restrictions.
There is, yeah, okay.
okay, I'm going to call the question. So we have a motion that's been seconded to send back a positive referral, citing several points in the POCD supporting that positive referral, and an addition of asking the zoning commission to consider potential affordable housing aspects in the application. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Me?
Holly, you're opposed?
Yes.
Okay, any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries 5-1. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your work on that. Your comment on the affordable will go back to the planning group tomorrow.
Thank you. Good job. Okay, Mr. Elliott, I'm sorry to have you waiting so long. We have a new business here. I assume you're here for this referral.
Nope.
I heard what I wanted to hear.
Oh, okay, okay.
He's not here for this referral.
You're not, okay. So we have a CGS 8-24 referral from the Board of Selectmen for an easement on the property located at 87 Riverside Road. Okay, Mr. Glidden, could you walk us through that?
So I have the map of the property up on the screen for you. This is the residential home. It's located between the Flower Bridge to the south, Drake Hill Road to the north, the White House. You'll see it as you come off Drake Hill Road. If you're making a right to drive towards to the south towards Avon, or you'll see this house. Well, the hatched area, which is over here, and I'll zoom in. It's the southern corner of the property. There's a bench out there. For a couple of years now, Park and Recreation has been maintaining and cutting the grass over there. And the homeowner would like to grant the town an easement, not just because of the fact that Parks and Rec have been using this. A lot of people, when they come to visit the Flower Bridge, will actually go to her yard, sit in the bench, and they assume this is part of the park. What's missing here, it's not shown on the surveys, just outside of the area that's the hashed area, which is what I zoomed in here, maybe we'll make it a little bigger. There's a row of pine trees. So if you did not have a survey.
Where's the row of pine trees?
It's literally right along the edge of the easement that's being proposed.
Between the
So the way
house
it
and the
functions, if you walk off the bridge, you go to the left, and there's a grassed area, and you see a large hedgerow of trees, and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's still part of
Yeah.
the park. No, that's private property.
The
So-
bench is private property
The
too?
bench is on private property too.
Really darned.
So this
I've sat on
easement,
it.
we have access to the property for maintenance and for the public to enjoy the park, the quote-unquote area that's been kind of used as a park. The only caveat out of this is that they'd like a fence because they like a fence constructed on top of the area above the slope going down to the Farmington River because kids have been using the bank as the way out of the river when they go jumping off the bridge. And, because there's a sandbar in front of her property. She explained it to us a couple of years ago when we met her out here. So this is
Some
kind
of us
of,
old farts do it too.
Holly speak from experience. So this is really, it's kind of cleaning things up over there. It is, it's, people have, like I said, visually assumed this is part of the park. This would satisfy, basically clarify the long-term trespass that's going on over there. And I can answer any questions. I put in your packet the referral, the submission from the Board of Selectmen. So they're just looking for a review, whether it's consistent with the plan of conservation development. It would in theory be providing public access to the Flower Bridge area and the Farmington River. So you're providing, an area for someone to go to enjoy the river, which,
Does this relinquish her from any legal action if someone gets hurt on her
Yeah.
property?
It does, it says it here.
It does?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
that was, I didn't want to
on
get
this
too deep
page.
in the weeds on that one.
That would be the important part to me.
That came up,
It's in
that
there.
came up too as part of our, she's with her council, which is a little outside of this commission's.
So from the river to the property, is there a bank there?
Yeah.
If you wanted to come out, you'd have to climb up a bank.
That's what people were doing.
I've
And
done
they
it.
actually, I wouldn't say that.
Hey, you're
not
not
for
supposed to
years,
jump off the
'cause-
bridge.
No,
yes.
when you raft down there and the crew team scowls at you for trying to get out there, you say, "Oh, this looks easier anyway," and it's sandy, but they've been putting up like chicken wire fences to discourage that for several
Yeah.
years. So it's been many years since I did
With the
that.
new town park across the river, there's gonna be a kayak access over there. That's a part of the new town park.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. So all the scoundrels will have a way to get out of the river finally.
So they're looking for a referral?
Yes. Positive
Whether it's
referral.
consistent with the plan of, goals and objectives of the plan of conservation development.
I make a motion that we make a positive referral
I second that motion.
Should we say what,
on,
do we have to
I'm
have a-
looking for the number.
I say it's not inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development.
Right.
Yeah, it's not,
You don't want
not inconsistent.
specifically, we did the last one?
I want to be as far away from this as possible.
And you can just say, it's not inconsistent with the goals and objectives of the P O C D, that's fine.
That's it.
Yeah, that's,
All
it
they're
is.
looking for is
It's
just
true.
Okay, so
an advisory opinion.
Dave, were you making
I was, CGS 824, positive referral. And that it is not the commission feels that it is not inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development.
Actually, it's a,
That's-
application, okay, never mind.
That's the first one, this is the one.
Right.
Do I have a second?
A second?
Seconded by Holly. Any discussion?
Why do you want to be as far away as possible?
I don't think this has anything to do with the planning commission or.
This is strange.
This is just a technicality because
That's
it's a town, it's not even town property, but town's gonna get some
Take
responsibility.
for it.
Yeah, and under the statute, if the town purchases, sells, or leases
Leases,
property,
right.
it triggers this referral.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess we're leasing it for $1.
yeah.
just pro forma.
Okay, yep. So, any
has
discussion?
to-
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
I think it's nice. I think it enhances that area.
It's not changing anything.
Well, it enhances, yeah.
Hey, Bill, may I
If it
move
has
to
come
adjourn?
before,
It
so you have to-
codifies.
Second? All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
Craig's gone.
Michael, did they talk?
Rich?